I'm driving down that road. I'm all alone. And my 1980 Corvette had a big, like, glass coupe type long back window, very good rear visibility. And what caught my eye was all of the unusual lights on this thing that came streaking in, and it zipped right by me and then stopped. And it was hovering right over what I knew to be one of the golf course greens. And there was a few trees between me and it, and there are trees on the other side of it. And at the end of it, because the golf course had a lot of trees and the way they designed the course. So it totally startled me. It was completely silent. I rolled down the window and there was no sound. I pulled my car off the road, opened my door, and stood and looked at it. And it was triangular shaped, but it didn't have a pointy front end. It had kind of a curved front end. And I couldn't see anything but the lower part of it. But all around it, it wasn't like individual lights that were going on and off or blinking or anything. It was almost like a plasma of changing colors going around the bottom.
Welcome back. Today we have an extraordinary story that has been waiting to be told for over 45 years. This is a tale of national security and an encounter with the unknown. Located in the heart of Oxfordshire, England, NATO's Upper Heyford base has been a pivotal site for military operations. But on December the 26th, 1980, something happened here that would change the narrative of UFO sightings forever. Today, viewers, I am honoured to introduce someone who has chosen myself and Chris Lehto to share his incredible story. U.S. Air Force test pilot Dan Isbell. Dan Isbell's story in the U.S. Air Force is nothing short of legendary, having flown over 70 aircraft types from nuclear bombers to the U-2 spy plane. With a high-level security clearance, he lived under the weight of secrecy, unable to share the details of his incredible encounter until now. What makes the story even more compelling is the date, the 26th of December, 1980, the same date as one of the key events in the Rendlesham Forest incident. Are the events connected? That question still lingers. What did Dan encounter? Amazingly, what he saw wasn't a sole sighting. He was not alone. On the same night, the same craft was seen hovering over Upper Heyford's nuclear weapons store by two more witnesses. What implications does this have about our understanding of UFOs and extraterrestrial encounters? This encounter that you are going to discover today is a piece of history. I believe it's important for people to know that we're not alone in the universe. And there are things out there that we don't understand. What you're about to hear is a detailed account of a real encounter. Dan Isbell's story is one of courage and resilience. After decades of silence, he's finally ready to share the truth. This could be one of the most significant UFO sightings ever documented. So let me take you back to this Air Force base in England called Upper Heyford. You were there in the late 70s and early 80s. Tell us about Upper Heyford and what was your role there? What were you flying before we got into what you saw?
Okay, I was flying the F-111E. RAF Upper Heyford was leased to the U.S. Air Force. It was a Royal Air Force base and continued to be. We were just leasing use of it. And part of the Cold War, we had a lot of forces over there, and the F-111Es were at Upper Heyford, and there were F-111Fs over at RAF Lakenheath over on the East Coast. But the RAF Upper Heyford is in a part of the UK called the Cotswolds, and it's kind of rolling hills, farming country, about 12 miles northwest of Oxford, England, and about an hour drive to London from there. And that's where I did all my operational fighter pilot training and experience. We deployed a lot.
And you flew F-111s operationally there for various sorties and things that that NATO wanted you to do.
I did. And we also had Victor alert, so we had to sit alert for a week at a time, and that's sort of prescient to how I ended up where I was when I was for my UAP encounter. Being the youngest guy, the youngest pilot in the squadron, that first year, um, I got the holidays.
Short end of the stick.
Yeah, short end of the stick. So I'm sitting alert during Christmas holiday.
Can you describe alert? Can you describe what that is for people?
We had special weapons in case the Cold War were to break out and we were to need that firepower. And those were closely held at the time. Of course, the Ministry of Defense knew about them, but the public didn't. But we set alert with those weapons in hardened concrete bunker type arrangements. There were no windows. When you went to your bunk to go to sleep, it was just you turn the light off, it's pitch dark in there. So we had flashlights with us, and we slept in our flight suits, and our boots were, ready with the speed laces to jump into and zip up and run if the klaxon went off. Fortunately, that never happened, but we did, we did some elephant walks every once in a while and various types of things to just exercise the aircraft and exercise our responses.
And it's hot cocked, right? You guys would have the jets fully ready to go, your inertial navigation systems already aligned, so everything's ready. So you can just jump
Precisely.
in. And the weapons would be basically ready to go as well, which is really
Yes.
quite interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to December 1980. Yeah. So in December 1980, you were on alert. Specifically, the 26th of December is the date of your sighting. It was the day after Christmas Day, and you drew the short straw of being still at the base and not going home or anything. That was great.
The changeover for the new crew to take over, because there was always a crew on alert, and that changeover happened on Fridays. So late in the day Friday, the new crew would take your place, and you would be allowed to go. I think I'd gone by the officers club because I'd missed basically everything being stuck out there for the whole week, but just kind of see some of the guys and have a little chat. We had a nice little officers club bar there at the base. But knowing that I got to drive home because I've got my Corvette out there, I'm by myself. I probably had a half a beer if I had anything, because I definitely didn't want a DUI in the UK. That would have been career ending right there. So I left probably around, we sang some songs and stuff, so fighter pilot songs, probably 9:30 to 10, and I had about a half hour drive to the town of Bister, where kind of they had a whole section of housing there because the base was so small. We had very few houses, maybe only the commander and so forth, that were directly on the base. So I was out in this other little housing district, and one of the main roads that I drove to get there went by this golf course, which I was familiar with. I had played it before. I wasn't on the course that day, but I knew, where it was.
And it backs onto the runway and perimeter fence.
That was really only uh, relevant because as I'm driving down that road, I'm all alone, and my 1980 Corvette had a big, like, glass coupe type long back window, very good rear visibility. And what caught my eye was all of the unusual lights on this thing that came streaking in, and it zipped right by me and then stopped. And it was hovering right over what I knew to be one of the golf course greens. And there was a few trees between me and it, and there are trees on the other side of it. And at the end of it, because the golf course had a lot of trees and the way they designed the course. So it totally startled me. It was completely silent. I rolled down the window and there was no sound. I pulled my car off the road, opened my door, and stood and looked at it. And it was triangular shaped, but it didn't have a pointy front end. It had kind of a curved front end. And I couldn't see anything but the lower part of it. But all around it, it wasn't like individual lights that were going on and off or blinking or anything. It was almost like a plasma of changing colors going around the bottom. The drawing that I sent to you by email was done by a forensic artist from the FBI, which I did agree with Ryan Graves to be interviewed by them, and they kept that from going public at that point because I requested it. But I was willing to document it for Americans for Safe Aerospace. Had it not been for the forensic artist working with me, I wouldn't have such a realistic picture of that or even the other episode that I had later. I've had 4 encounters
Wow.
in my lifetime. This one, though, was the first ever, and being an aerospace engineer and knowing, I mean, we were trained for our combat so we could recognize all aircraft systems that we might encounter, and all friendly aircraft so that we knew the difference. And this clearly wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't an airplane, it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. And it was my first ever encounter with an actual UAP. So my first curiosity inkling was to make my way to it. So I walked around the back of my car and started walking through the field, headed toward the trees, and then it reacted to that. And it started lowering itself down. And then I got kind of like scared because I go, if anybody saw me seeing a UFO, that would be the end of my career before I even got to test pilot school. So I had this immediate response that I need to run back to my car and get out of here before somebody sees me. And I'm not going to tell a soul that I ever saw this because, when you're doing the Victor alert and stuff, you're on special top secret clearance with personnel reliability program, PRP. And so psychological testing was a big part of that. And it would have been an easy thing for them to just basically say, no, he's crazy, mark me crazy, and then goes my flying career. So I dared not tell a soul, and I didn't. I never told anybody about it for all those years.
You were alone in your car on that road, but were there any other sightings by anybody else of a similar craft at the same time? Elaborate that.
Well, I certainly wasn't aware of it, and I'm certainly going to ask anybody. But I did find out from a March 22nd, 2023 show that Linda Moulton Howe did on her Earth Files YouTube channel. She had a guy that was using the pseudonym of Smith Jones, and he was I think a staff sergeant at the time at RAF Upper Heyford. And on that, not on the 26th, but at 1 a.m. on the 27th, so approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes from when I saw that, he had one show up. The weapons storage area, he was guarding some weapons on a trailer until the weapons people came to, he was basically with a rifle, so doing security. He told about how he kind of walked back and forth like a sentry, and he's looking one way, looking the other way, looking all around with his rifle on his shoulder. And at one of those points, he turned around and all of a sudden here this thing was, and it was just hovering with the front end toward him, but it was a little bit below his elevation. So he's looking straight into what he said was a glass front that looked like the floor was lighted, and the light looked like it came from the floor up, not the ceiling down. He didn't see any beings in there, but this thing was just hovering there, and he thought, wow, that's not ours.
And was it roughly the same shape and as the craft that you saw an hour and a half earlier?
Yeah, he had a much closer look at it, and later, as they were putting the weapons in storage, it was hovering over them, over the weapon storage area. And so he got to see the underneath, he got to see the top and the front and the back as it went away. So he had a much closer encounter, but the only way I knew about that was he finally agreed not to be on camera, but to have his voice disguised a little and use a pseudonym and tell the story on Linda Moulton Howe's Earth Files. And after I watched that, I noticed in her description, she requested if anybody else had a sighting like this at that time frame, please contact me via Proton mail. And so she had her Proton email address. So I quickly got a Proton email account, and I created a really strange name that didn't relate to mine as my email address. And I sent her an email about it and told her what my experience was. And then she emailed me back and asked me if I would provide her a phone number, and I did. And that following week, I was actually in San Antonio, Texas, at a science and technology symposium teaching directed energy weapons, which I have been doing since 2010. So that night in my hotel room, my cell phone rang, and it was Linda Moulton Howe. And she really wanted me to do like the Smith Jones thing. And I said, I'm still on a top secret clearance. And I have a reputation that I have to uphold to have credibility for the people I'm teaching. So I just don't think this is probably a good time for me to come out with that, because it's important that I finish this work, which I finally did in 2024, late 2024. So I told her I wasn't willing to do that at this point. But her focus on the call mostly was about the one there, because in her show, she reported that RF Falconberry, which is a little north of RF Upper Heyford, plus more than just this one guy, had reported sightings at Upper Heyford, physically on the base or over the base. And it was in that same time frame with Rendlesham Forest, which I always thought that was just all by itself, Um, And I didn't know about Rendlesham Forest at the time that I had my sighting. I learned about it when it came on TV for the first time, and the Charles Halt memo that he wrote to the MOD got declassified and put out there, and all of a sudden people are talking about it.
And Dan, did you see the craft? Did you see the craft moving? What kind of vectors did it go at? Vertical speed, horizontal speed?
Yeah, I saw it zipping in. It was moving very fast, and I saw it in my rearview mirror, and it caught my attention because it wasn't normal and it was not at road level. It was up above the trees and moving very, very quickly. I can't estimate the speed because, again, that's my rearview mirror, and I'm driving forward on that at night on a small road. But it not only went by me, but it stopped instantaneously. I mean, there was no like slow down, there was no change in attitude. It just went from streaking along to bink, and it's just sitting there, totally stationary. And of course, I know enough about G forces and inertia and all the other stuff that happens to us in airplanes. That's not normal. So that certainly got my attention. And the only other motion I saw it do while I was just sat there silent was, as I walked towards the woods, it was clearly aware of me. It was clearly stopping because of my car and me. Why, I don't know. But it responded when I started walking towards the golf course. And it responded by starting down silently. And then that's when I thought, why are you doing? If you get involved with something like this and anybody finds out, and your career is over before I was literally, I'd just been fully mission ready declared in June of that year. So I'd been an operational, fully certified, fully cleared, mission ready pilot for 6 months. And I was enjoying what I was doing. I didn't want to stop it. So yeah, that's really why I didn't get more involved. I'm kind of glad, after hearing about what happened um, with some of the personnel that were exposed. That's really concerning. Maybe it's a good thing I didn't get too close, because as an engineer and scientist, I'm firmly convinced that the way those craft are working has to be a very strong electromagnetic force field that they're creating. How they're doing it, I don't know. I have a lot more understanding about electrical stuff in connection to the electromagnetic spectrum from having worked on high power microwave and high energy laser weapon systems. But, but I do understand that if you're too close to those kinds of fields without shielding, human bodies aren't really designed to stay. Like why we don't go stand in front of an operating aircraft radar, uh, unless it's real cold, and then it'll make you feel warm because it actually thermally heats your skin. But it's not a good idea long term to be exposed to that stuff. And of course, there are people who were injured, and but none of that was in my head at the time. I didn't even think about it. I'm just curious as I can be because the way my brain works. I go, well, this is fascinating because this is not a conventional anything. So what is it?
That's a very good point that a lot of people have said when they see something which falls into the category of highly strange. The human brain always tries to say it's a brick, it's a plane, it's a light. And when you see something which doesn't qualify for any pigeonhole in your pilot and skilled brain, how did that? What did it look like? I mean, what does something which is totally unknown do to your brain? How did it make you feel? And were you trying to say, "Ooh, it's a light"? Tell us about the experience and how you processed it.
Yeah, I wasn't confusing it as any kind of terrestrial thing that I know of or any kind of aircraft. It was clearly an anomalous craft that had flight characteristics and abilities that I had never been exposed to, of course. So at first there was a bit of ontological shock, but that was quickly overcome by just insane curiosity because part of me just wanted to go see if they would let me in and let me fly it for a little while. I mean, that's just the fighter pilot speaking to me, right? I'll have a go at this thing. Let's see what it can do. But of course, that would have been a very stupid thing to do. And even though my first inclination is to get an even closer look, although it's pretty close, it was probably, I would estimate 150 feet or so away from me.
Wow.
So that's pretty dang close. But there were no other cars on the road. There was no other person stopping. And I didn't want to have a conversation with anybody about it ever because of the stigma and what it can do to my flying career. And I'm not alone. I think most pilots that I know that now have come out had the same reaction during their flying years.
Well, 150 feet away. I mean, so is there any doubt in your mind that this wasn't a completely anomalous, advanced flying machine?
Well, I can't say that for sure that if we have been able to reverse engineer and create a craft like that, I won't say it's not. I just say that it was not certainly anything with a jet engine or a reciprocal engine. It didn't have any kind of, throw something out the back to make it go forward. It didn't have speed brakes or, it didn't bank up real quick to stop. It just went zink. So it was close enough to me to witness, even from inside my car, that I had no doubt that this was not anything that you could come up with a prosaic explanation for. Could it have been a reversed engineered craft in 1980? Possibly. But then the question would be, why would it be doing that? Why would it be in that area? I know where we test things like that. I've been there. Not to S4, but to Area 51. And I know why we have that secrecy. And my unit at Hill Air Force Base was a detachment, just like the detachment is at Area 51. It's a part of the Edwards Air Force Base. That's where the ultra classified stuff happens, whether it's weapons or aircraft. And there's a good reason for it to be secret because we don't want to give that away to any of our adversaries. So could it have been that? If it was certainly well advanced beyond anything that I had knowledge of. And I was never an intel guy. Never ever. I was in a lot of TSSCI special access programs, including USAPs, which is unacknowledged special access programs, where even the code word was classified, so you couldn't share it with anybody. I've been in that, but not for anything related to UAP or reverse engineering. I have no background in that. But as an engineer scientist brain, my brain immediately tried to figure out how could that be possible? Because that's the part where my brain just won't let it go. How is that possible?
Thank you so much, Dan. But there's far more to his story. Dan kindly shared over 2 hours of his testimony with me and Chris Lehto. Today, I chose to concentrate on Dan's Upper Heyford story, but Chris Lehto, on his excellent Lehto files, picks up where Dan left off, deep diving into Dan's US Air Force career and revealing 3 more UFO sightings that Dan had. Check out Chris Lehto's channel for that testimony. What you have heard today is a major sighting from a credible witness. Now Dan has revealed his sighting after 45 years of silence. Show him the respect he deserves by honoring his US Air Force duty and his respect for silence while in active duty. And most of all, his braveness for coming forward with this encounter here today. Thank you for watching, because today, you viewers just became part of history.